Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, where we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experience. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology who will be bringing you their perspectives on how digital transformation is reshaping the way we recruit, engage, and graduate learners. You'll hear firsthand accounts of how institutional leaders are developing their strategy, as well as get deeper on the stories of how these EdTech tools are being built to foster better student outcomes. With that, let's get to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 335. Jason Sizz, President and CEO of the Institute of International Education. Really a great conversation exploring the work that they do, just researching, understanding the international student population, both the students who study here in the United States and our students from the United States that study elsewhere in the country. Certainly, there's been a lot of turbulence and kind of tumultuousness in that area. So it felt like a very timely conversation to continue to examine that, why the work is important, and just how it's evolving and changing to adapt to the current landscape. We'll definitely encourage you to reach out to check out all the great resources that the Institute of International Education, IIE, has available. They just do so much great work in this space and just definitely great folks to follow. But I really enjoyed getting the chance to talk to Jason for this episode, number 335, with Jason Sizz. In the field of international and global education, I feel like right now there is no shortage of things to kind of talk about, new trends and just things happening, certainly anchoring in the U.S. perspective and things that are happening here that sort of ripple out to the rest of the globe. And I think it's an area that I don't have a lot of background in. So I think coming into this conversation, super excited to learn from our guests here. Jason, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and go over your background, and then we'll get into more of the work that you do and your team does, and then talking just generally about some global enrollment and kind of mobility trends right now.
Great. Well, for having me this morning, Dustin. Great to be on your podcast. My name is Jason Sizz. I am President and CEO of the Institute of International Education. I've been president for the past year, but I've been with IIE now for 13 years in a variety of different roles. And I love what we I had my first experience as an international student when I was 17 years old. Won a scholarship from the Rotary to go to Toulouse, France, and do my senior year of high school. And so that I caught the bug from that experience, and in college went to Russia and studied as it was a big part of my education growing up.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm sure a lot of folks listening be like, oh my gosh, doing my senior year of high school in another country. In hindsight, it's just, I learned so much. It was like incredible. And I'm sure in some moments maybe of just, what am I doing here, man? Just a little culture shock after any of that kind of stuff. But that's incredible. Yeah, and I know that in a couple of different areas, like certainly for me, my higher education journey was a lot around residence life. And I think people who get into that world sort of stick around or whatever, but there's certain things where it's just, I didn't know that was a job. But certainly from the folks that I've talked to, they do maybe, early formative time, some sort of study abroad type trip or something, and really affirms their kind of appreciation, respect, and eventually their commitment to enabling those kind of opportunities for others. So if you want to just build off that, because you've been at Institute of International Education for a long time now, so I'm sure you can just give a little bit of context on kind of the history, at least for your time there, but just speak a bit to the work that organization does, just in case folks maybe aren't aware.
So IIE was formed in 1919, so we're 107 years old. Certainly one of the oldest nonprofits in the United States, and we were formed based on the simple idea that if people have the opportunity to interact with each other, learn each other's cultures, learn each other's languages, that conflict is less likely to happen. So that's why we were formed World War I, and that has been our mission ever since that time. In terms of what we do today, we implement some of the world's most prestigious scholarships. We have the honor of being the primary implementer for Fulbright Student, and which is funded by Department of State. Likewise, we do some critical language programs for Department of War, as well as the Boren Scholarship. So these are some of our core scholarship programs. And I should mention also the Gilman program, which is a really important program in terms of providing financial means or a grant American undergrads to have an international experience. And there's approximately 3,500 American students who have the opportunity to study abroad under the Gilman Scholarship every year. And sort of the other category of programs that we implement are humanitarian or rescue programs. So several programs in that category. One is our Scholar Rescue Program, where we rescue a scholar and their family from a crisis or endangerment situation and find them a posting at a safe university in a safe country. And recently we just awarded our 2000th grant over the past 20 or so years. But we've been doing this program now for over 100 years. It was one of our original programs. And then we have our Odyssey Scholarship Program, whereby we provide a scholarship to a refugee or displaced student to pursue their entire bachelor's or master's degree. And we only started this program 5 years ago, but we've now given out over 200 grants under this program. And what makes the IIE program very unique is that once you win it, it's for your entire degree program, which is tremendously helpful to a refugee student. They don't have to worry about year 2, year 3. They know once they win the IIE scholarship that they not only have their tuition paid, but they also receive a living stipend.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of our programs.
Yeah, and a lot of amazing work. And I think, yeah, especially the full ride that can be available, because I think that's always just so powerful when just one variable or two in this case, tuition and living expense and all that is just cool. All right, those are taken care of. Now you can just focus on your studies, focus on building community, doing all the kind of extracurricular things and whatever else it might be that'll be meaningful for that student with their college experience. But I guess just speak as briefly as you can capture it, the idea that you're not just like throwing money at people that just have a different sort of label slapped on it. That idea of these are very purposeful or kind of mission driven. For Fulbright, I feel like is probably the one that most people are kind of just familiar with in a broad sense. What are the mechanics of, okay, we have this money, it's given to this person, this sort of then what piece? I guess somebody gets that Fulbright scholarship, just as maybe an example, just to make sure people kind of clarify their understanding of you as an organization allocating these funds. What are the mechanics of how they're kind of utilized over time?
And I should say our role is to facilitate the selection. We don't make the decision in terms of who receives any of the grants, but we help facilitate the selection panels and other processes that go into the implementation of these programs. But then once the person wins the award, there's an entire process that takes place depending on which type of award. So for instance, there may be then a placement process. So we work then, if the person doesn't come with a university where they've already been placed, we'll help them find a university to be placed at. Likewise, in terms of area study and so forth, all of that goes into it. Then there's all the logistics, the plane ticket, the visa, all the other aspects that go into helping that student or scholar be able to have a smooth and fruitful experience on their scholarship program. And then for most of our programs, we continue to provide monitoring and advice to that student or scholar. So if they have a problem, a situation, if they need advice about certain fields of study or courses, we try to provide some of that, as well as their home institution, of course. But we remain in contact with them to help. Then there is the repatriation process, so bringing them back to their host country, and that process. And then almost all of our programs have very robust alumni networks. So keeping them plugged into the alumni network, regardless of whether they have their own association or not, we try to keep that contact. So we can also, for instance, with the Gilman program, what are they doing for their home community when they return home? Looking at these different aspects of the scholarship programs and how they then contribute back to their home community, their home university, is also a piece of most of our programs.
Yeah, I appreciate you clarifying that, because I think I've seen, I guess, maybe just smaller, I can't think of the right terminology, but like scholarships where a student's just out perusing maybe a sort of like repository of scholarships, and it's, yeah, we'll give you some amount of money if you maybe come from a certain background or want to pursue a certain area of study or something, and it's just like, all right, here's your money, good luck. And maybe they'll do some sort of, yeah, could you give us some little like testimonials or quotes or whatever. And either kind of like just smaller things. But the idea of why organizations like yours persist and I think are so important and impactful and all that kind of stuff is that it's all those like details of it of, okay, sourcing people in terms of folks that may be interested and encouraging them to apply, or just curating that and making sure that they're evaluated through like the panels and things that you're saying, like you gather and all that. But then it's the idea of what enables the people to do these amazing things that they're saying, yeah, I want this money to do blank. It's like, there's then a lot of behind the scenes stuff or sort of a longer tail afterwards. But even then, all that kind of led up to that moment of that person being chosen to win that particular award. But, using that, I guess, as the context here, the vantage point that you all are looking out on the global enrollment, mobility trends right now in higher education specifically, we'll start super high up, 30,000 feet view here, and we'll start to get a little bit more detailed, but just talk a bit about global enrollment and mobility trends right now as you all see them.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Just a couple things I'd like to add, though, on the last points you made. All of our programs have very robust application processes that are part of it. And then likewise, once a person is chosen for one of these scholarship programs, they participate in pre-departure orientations and other things that, again, our goal is to make that exchange experience as useful and fruitful as possible for that individual. But Dustin, you're getting to the major questions that are on everybody's mind right now in terms of international mobility. One of the things that we do at IIE, we have a very robust research department. And for the past 76 years, we've been producing the premier mobility report called Open Doors. And what the Open Doors data showed for last year, just short of a 5% increase of international students coming to the United States, so about 1,177,000. And this is all categories, such as undergrad, graduate, optional and practical training. And likewise, we also look at American students going overseas, and the number was just short of 300,000. Which is good. We saw a big bounce after the pandemic, but we're still not quite at the level we were before the pandemic. We're about 50,000 short. And so we would love to see more Americans study overseas. We like to see the numbers continue to climb for international students coming to the United States. We have a tremendous amount of capacity here in the United States to host international students. And we have the most varied and robust higher education system here in the United States in terms of the many different majors you can do, the class sizes, size of universities, and that makes us a powerhouse. The sheer variety of our higher education landscape here in the United States. Likewise, on mobility, I would say we produce the Open Doors once a year, but we also do snapshots. So we do a fall snapshot and a spring snapshot. For the fall snapshot, it showed a 17% decline in new enrollments, and we'll produce the spring snapshot next month, so we'll have that information shortly. For going back to the fall snapshot, it showed a 17% decline in enrollments for international students, so that's inbound to the United States. But overall, the international student population only shrunk by 1%. So we'll be very interested to see what the spring snapshot shows. One thing we do at IIE is we don't try to forecast. We look at the data and we tell the industry what we're seeing from that data. We're looking forward to producing that spring snapshot next month.
Yeah, do you feel like it's in many things, if not almost everything, a fool's errand to be spending too much time doing predictions? Because I feel like it's just, I guess from my perspective, and also not as a betting man or anything, there's just so much going on so quickly. It can be like, it's just impossible to know what, and certainly in this context, like what the kind of growth or decline or that sort of thing. But I guess it's even just like a brief follow-up to affirm, and you don't have to get it into necessarily the weeds here, but I know something that I've observed in the U.S. of students from abroad coming to study here is that it is pretty grossly uneven, where some institutions are like, yeah, we're still doing gangbusters with all our international students. It's been pretty steady and consistent, if not growing. And then other institutions are just really struggling to maintain or having declines. So are you seeing that there's a kind of discrepancy that's pretty dramatic between institutions in terms of some that are doing really well and some that aren't? Because it sounds like that maybe as of right now, there's that kind of stabilization, at least, and some rebound from the pandemic, if I'm hearing you correctly. But yeah, just curious on any sort of broad perspective on the institutional comparisons in terms of international enrollment here in the U.S.
I mean, right now, every single university that we meet with wants international students on their campus. I haven't met with a single university that says, nope, we're withdrawing. And it doesn't matter whether it's a red state, blue state. Every school that we meet with wants to participate. Every state wants to participate in international education. I believe that will continue. In terms of whether there's particular schools, the other point I would make, there's always been a draw to some of our largest schools here in the United States, but the geographic diversity in terms of where international students go to study is quite good. I mean, I just visited last week University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and about 25% of the student body is international. If you look at schools like Indiana and Bloomington, Missouri, Columbia, the one thing that we try to, in trying to educate folks about international education, is to make clear that international education and the benefits of having international students in the United States is not just for Boston or New York, the typical centers that people think about, but it's also about Charleston, South Carolina, and some of these other cities in the Midwest that I just mentioned, that international education is extremely important to the health and vibrancy of their universities, as well as the local economies in these states.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember, and I'm sure this gets even more into the weeds, so we'll leave it at this, but the idea, I worked for 2 years at a school in Bangor, Maine, and they had a good kind of mechanism in terms of the things that you noted that are important in these sort of programs, is welcoming the students in, helping make sure they're like really well supported from the second they kind of land in the airport, bringing them to campus, and doing a lot of that kind of support infrastructure. But then you could have just a flimsy kind of landing pad at your institution, which there's always that sort of intangible kind of existential word of mouth or whatever, as you maybe have students where it's like, the experience wasn't so great, they struggled with this, that, the other. That'll always be a bit of a headwind. But yeah, and I think just given kind of the time that we have here, we'll definitely link out to the fall Open Doors report that you'd mentioned and just all that information. I think with the timing of this episode too, it might come out when the newest one is available. So we'll definitely encourage folks just generally to utilize that resource. That is one of the things that I think I probably knew of before I knew more about your organization. I think it is just one of those like regular, consistent, amazing resources that folks love to tap into and to have conversations about. From your perspective, like, why does this work remain so critical to the economic competitiveness of the U.S.? Because I think that idea of everything's been in flux the past couple of years and everything, I've seen over the past decade at this point. But I guess it's a motivation piece about like why this work remains so critical.
I mean, almost every issue that we confront is global in nature. So where it be AI, public health matters, everything requires a degree of international cooperation. So having folks are fluent in working internationally is wonderful and absolutely required for industry. That's not going to go away. But at the top of this episode, you talked a little bit sort of of being an international student, or my own experience in France helps you develop tremendously. Going through that stress, that experience helps you become who you're going to end up being. You learn a lot about yourself in terms of leadership skills and a variety of other skills. And so developing young people who have that experience, have cultural experience around the world, is tremendously important. And that's a generalization. And then they go into their subspecialty and, being able to work with France, being able to work with Japan, being able to work with these countries where you understand some of their language or are fluent, their culture, that will help you in terms of getting a job and doing well within whatever company or organization that you go to work for. And that can be on a variety of different topics. We mentioned health, AI, a variety of topics, or smart industries. That keeps going. And what I would also mention for your viewership is, you talked about the university and your example up in Bank and what universities can do to encourage. I would say for your listenership that, consider IIE a resource. If we can be of help in terms of talking to you about Fulbright, Gilman, Boren, or a variety of private sector scholarships, give me a call. Our team would be happy to come out to your campus, talk about these wonderful life-changing programs to both your students and scholars. And I will stress scholars are an important piece of all of this, in that a lot of times the university is creating that linkage because of a scholarly exchange. As you know, many of our scholars in the United States, they have significant linkages with industry as well. So going back for this part, that's also an important linkage to keep up.
Yeah, that's something just for me, like it does feel like, yeah, we're in such a global society now, and like you see it anytime with just like certain events that happen halfway around the world. It's just, okay, you're feeling it in your pocketbook, you're seeing it on the store shelves, and then that, yeah, has like a day-to-day impact for people. It has these sort of like economic shifts of, oh, okay, like the US is going to try to make moves in terms of certain industries, which then, yeah, it ripples out where institutions are trying to kind of meet this projected demand in terms of certain industries and certain jobs and whatever else. So then that might be why a student chooses to study what they study, where they study, and those sort of things. And I'll use this kind of segue to my next question of not getting into the prediction business here, but like any trend lines that you're following at the moment of like things that are happening that you're going to be kind of tracing to see how it kind of develops in the near future, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Students want internship experiences. So what we're seeing is more of a move, and this has been happening for a while now, in terms of, for instance, the students we to Kazakhstan, they'll do, say, a half a day at the university and then half a day at a local organization or company. And so that's such an enriching experience in terms of gaining business connections, understanding how companies operate in that environment, and a great deal of in increasing their language ability to actually use it in a setting is extremely important. So we see that in a variety of countries. In Europe, in Germany especially, has been one country that has been top in this area, Japan, South Korea, etc. So American students certainly want an internship as part of their international experience. Likewise, international students coming to the United States, especially, after a graduate program, a fair number of students avail themselves of the optional practical training program and get that experience with an American company or organization. And it's good for the American industry. That person goes back then with a connect that company can continue to keep that connection alive to, look at new markets, learn about new fields. We see this both ways, and it's extremely beneficial to the United States and, keeping our economy at the top level.
Yeah, I guess what I'm now thinking is like it can and should be this sort of like virtuous cycle or sort of like symbiotic kind of thing. Like we have our students here, if we're exporting them out and just whatever they learn, maybe they come back and bring it here, but then even just sort of the relationship building, the soft power and like all these different things. And I guess, and I think maybe this terminology like that, very much like I was a history major in undergrad, that idea of just how does the world interact on a political basis and how that's informed by like economic ties and cultural ties and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the other thing that came to mind is I'm sure this is probably less so the case now because I think there's just been much more kind of maturity and evolution of the sort of study abroad work, where I think there maybe was like in decades past, and I'm sure people that just thought, oh, you're just like studying abroad out in France and just gallivanting and having a fun time or whatever. But that idea that if somebody, yeah, either way, a student going to another country, whether it's from the US somewhere else, from somewhere else to the US, like the idea that like, yes, I want to get the classroom experience, I want to embrace the culture, but I do still want to get the practical, hands-on, experiential learning opportunities that every student wants and needs and should be able to get. So we'll wrap up as we always do. If you want to kind of just synergize everything, synthesize everything together here, and kind of give you the final word of advice that you would give to other higher ed leaders navigating this moment.
So number one, I would say, and you just touched upon it, a full realization that both for American families and families who send their children to the United States for international education, you're talking about a tremendous investment on the part of that student and that family. It is not something that they can easily change paths on. It's a huge investment of time and money for those families. So keeping that in mind, and they really want to get a great deal out of it, whether that be a studying, internship, etc., that student sees this as an important experience for their future career and their future ability to work and being successful. But overall, I would say a few things in terms of the current environment is to remember for international higher ed leaders is that having international students on your campus brings in a great deal of cultural experience for your students. Given the small numbers of American students who study overseas, having international students on your campus may be the only experience that your American students have in terms of being able to interact with international folks. So that's really important. The other thing I would say for American higher ed leaders is please make an international experience a core element of your academic programs. Some of our academic programs are too rigid and don't provide the time or opportunity for American students to have an international experience. And the program should have that, and it should be encouraged. So that's a major aspect of it. And then in terms of, as I mentioned, with scholars and students coming in, please consider IIE a resource. We're happy to come out and visit your campus and talk to your leadership, your faculty, and your students about all the many opportunities there are to have both students come from overseas and scholars come from overseas to your campus, as well as to have your faculty and students have an international experience.
Really great call out there on the sort of just practical element of all the other stars could align for a student being like, I want to do this, I would love to, and whatever else. My program of study just will not accommodate it unless I want to take an extra year or something, which is just not a luxury that most students have. So I think that just being, something where, institutional leaders could go talk about that this week kind of thing. Just, let's maybe put that on the to-do list, make that examination, anticipating maybe the summer when you can maybe do a little tinkering like that. But I do think that other point of welcoming international students to your campus just has like a great kind of byproduct of kind of collateral effect of benefiting all the other students in your community to get that exposure and to hopefully, maybe inspire them to do the same to another country elsewhere in the world. So I very much appreciate that. I very much appreciate you all obviously putting out some great resources, and just appreciate you for jumping on, having this conversation, sharing all that you did. And just make sure folks listening, check out the episode description for links to everything that we talked about and to learn more about IIE's work. But just really great talking with you, and just thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dustin.
Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Geek podcast. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. So be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.